Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to Reimagine Next, the Future of Learning virtual summit organized by ET Government and Microsoft. The coronavirus pandemic has seriously upended the education system. Along with the shift from classrooms to computer screens, almost all aspects of learning are being tested. With the emergence of virtual reality and augmented reality technologies, the education industry can consider adding more immersive and interactive experiences. Today at this forum, we'll get to know the expert views on creating modern immersive classrooms and learning experiences, future readiness by content accessibility, ability to work on advanced ML and AI-based projects from anywhere, etc. Now I would like to invite T. Radhakrishna, Editor, South ET Government, for the opening address. Over to you.
Boston Consulting Group partner, Mr. Amit Kumar, participating dignitaries and distinguished speakers and delegates. On behalf of ET Government, I extend a warm welcome to all of you to the Microsoft Presents Reimagine Next, the Future of Learning being held today. As we all know that the COVID-19 has shaken the higher education system globally. There is no exception for India. Traditional learning has accepted COVID-19 challenge and also the mammoth task of adopting new processes, all using technology. Educational institutions across the private and public sectors have successfully responded to the necessity and created a technology-led backup system supported to keep continuity in learning. The key objective of today's summit is to address evolving challenges that the learning market is facing today and to discuss innovations and proven solutions for building the future of learning. The National Education Policy 2020, introduced by the central government, is expected to bring profound changes to education in India. The policy, approved by the Cabinet, outlines the vision of India's new education system, and the policy is a comprehensive framework for elementary education to higher education, as well as vocational training in both rural and urban India. The policy aims to transform India's education system rapidly. The policy is built on the foundational pillars of access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability, and is aligned with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals. The India's apex bodies, University Grants Commission, All India Council for Education Institutions, and their ecosystem are playing significant roles in this regard. The today's summit has a keynote address by Boston Consulting Group partner, Mr. Amit Kumar. It is followed by a special working session, Key Challenges of Hybrid Work, Cost, Security, Employee Morale, and a panel discussion on modern immersive classrooms. Professor Karnam Umameshwar Rao, Director of National Institute of Technology, Surathkal, Dr. Revati Venkatraman, Chairperson of School of Computing, SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Mr. Amit Pawar, Director of Education, Asia Microsoft, Mr. Amit Kumar, partner, Boston Consulting Group, will be taking part in the panel discussion. An MTC showcase, a day in the life of a professional from the industry, will follow them. Using the summit, we have tried to put the best content and trends before you for the benefit of the industry and the nation. I once again welcome all of you to the Microsoft Presents Reimagine Next, the Future of Learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Radhakrishna, for giving us the brief introduction on Reimagine Next. Now I would like to invite Mr. Amit Kumar, partner, Boston Consulting Group, for a keynote address. This keynote address will be followed by a working session on key challenges of hybrid work, cost, security, employee morale. Again, by Mr. Amit Kumar. Platform is all yours, Mr. Kumar.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and pleasure interacting with all the participants. I think it is very well established fact that in the past about 24 months, we've realized that the future is going to be different. There are a couple of things that we've realized. For example, everything will be hybrid, which are very, very well accepted facts. What I wanted to do today is share with you certain thoughts on how do we see that shaping the future of learning. Here I want to bring together some of our thinking, also some of the interaction we've been having with certain knowledge industries who are leading the way in shaping this. What I would be very keen to do is that also hear from you, and our colleague Arpit will be very happy to get your inputs, questions on chat, so that we make the working session a productive one. I think before we get into some of the details, it's also important for us to think through that what is the framework, what is the dimension that we can think about the problem at hand. This is like a problem where a lot of solutions existed before. To give an example, when we are in a classroom, we have about 20 students, participants, everyone has an equal footing. However, when we go to a hybrid model, how do we ensure that the student who's joining remotely versus the student who's in the classroom, they have an equitable experience, both in terms of what they believe they're learning and actual learning as well. To bring together all of this, we believe there are 4 key dimensions that we need to sit back and think about. The first is that how do we interact? And just a call out that it is not just about using a medium which is enabling a video and audio interaction, but it also talking about that how we actually bring together a personalized relationship over that medium. The second key aspect that we talk about in how we interact is the importance of asynchronous and location agnostic learning mechanism. As we think about it, in real life, everything is synchronous. We find it very easy, but I will pick on some of the examples why asynchronous is becoming increasingly important as we go about learning new ways. Productivity, there has been a very good debate whether productivity has increased or decreased, where the time spent on the same activity has increased or decreased. I think jury is still not out, but it is something we'll need to watch out so that the learners are not spending inordinate amount of time and they are not getting fatigued. We talk a lot about how we interact, but I guess equally, and if I may say, more important part of this future is how we lead. And it is not just the learned professors, teachers, but also the entire staff or the learning centers who actually enable that learning. So ensuring that the feeling of being led throughout the learning journey, how do we enable that is an important one. Culture is something which has not been solved for. And this is something I want to touch upon during the last part of our discussion today, is that while technology can enable interaction, equitable experience, culture is something, for example, a campus is known for, which passes on when people are having a coffee at the corner shop. How do you emulate that? And how do we enable that it continues? That's a big, big thing that I would urge you to maybe share your learnings and your thoughts on. Lastly, we spoke about culture, but equally important is the importance of diversity and inclusion. There are chances that this is not appropriately represented or, looked at, but how do we ensure that we are continuing to make progress on a very, very important factor like this? Then there are 2 things on how we organize and what we need is, which are essentially what we do to make it happen. I'll not go into all of these details, but 2 important things as we talk about and what we need is how are we thinking about the space design? Are our classrooms, are our working places the same as they were in 2019, or are they changing? Obviously, they are changing. What kind of changes people are doing? I'll be very happy to share some things. Tools and technologies beyond the interaction medium. In learning, there is a huge element of lab ecosystem. How do we ensure that cybersecurity is taken care of? How do we enable that is also important. Then what we did was that we actually did a series of workshops. We spoke to many people looking at what is it that they have already achieved. So what was great is that nearly everyone we spoke to say that hybrid is the way forward. They've thought about it and they have arrived at it. So this is something which I will say is that decision is behind us. The second part, everyone agrees that is that the way we work today, operating model, the team structure is also going to change. That is also behind us. There's a set of things that are being experimented right now. And what we say experimented is that we say different organization centers approaching this from 2 different dimensions, sometimes even opposite end of the spectrum, but obviously each one has its own merit. The 2 important elements here is, as we spoke about, is the redesign of the spaces as well as the lab ecosystem. However, another aspect where we see what lies ahead is the culture, innovation, and the equitable thinking of how people get together and work. What I want to do today is that pick up 3 of these, talk about what are the key elements which actually shape the thinking on this. And as we think about that, there is an element of cost that comes in. There is an element of investment, and investment is not just the dollar investment. It's also investment of the leadership, senior time that goes into shaping and maturing that part. The second element I talk about is that what is the uplift that we get from the learning experience? Are we aiming for it to be equal of pre-pandemic, or today do we see an opportunity to actually exceed on what we had pre-pandemic? And last is in terms of the security, very, very important, given the fact that it's not just the cybersecurity, it's also the element of personal data, the IP that gets generated in a lot of learning ecosystems, how that is protected. With this, I will move ahead. But as we speak, I will definitely urge you to, if you have any questions, please feel free to put that in the chat. I will request my colleagues to share it with me. I will maybe take next 7 to 8 minutes to walk through what we have learned, and then we'll be eager to actually get your inputs and have a discussion through a working model. As we speak about the working spaces, there are 3 key things that are happening. One is that instead of a space being allocated to a group, for example, this is the class for a particular group of people, what is changing is that the spaces are allocated by activities. 2 things that happen is that people have wide variety of spaces, and these could be physical or these could be virtual spaces where they can use the tools to interact with each other or also work in an individual capacity. The second key thing which is happening is that design of neighborhood zones. And neighborhood zones is something which was not even thought of maybe about 24 months ago, because the need was never felt, because this was so natural. Neighborhood zone is that where the different participants have what I call it unstructured collision of ideas, where they get together and start discussing, okay, you know what, I tried this and this is the learning I had. What didn't work, what worked, what your interests are. How do we emulate that from a structured perspective is a big challenge, and neighborhood zones are a big, big investment that is going into there. Third is the immersive experience of all the participants, so that as we talk about a model of hybrid, how do we have an experience which looks real or in some sense better than real on what we have. Some of our learnings has been, and this is not something which each organization will have all of these, but it's a long list of things that we believe activity-based spaces which are there. Neighborhood spaces we spoke about, but just to talk about 2 or 3 additional things that we can talk about, there is an element of the learning cafe that we believe is important, where we say that how people have what I call in a casual thing that, okay, chilling out and learning from each other, right? That has to be structured and done about it. Third is that there is a element of home spaces as well. How do we ensure that there is a standardized way of thinking? The institutions are also prescribing that how people are operating inside their homes or in their hostels, so that the learning is optimized and it is not just focused on the bare minimum infra that is available to them. While we got into the pandemic, there was a need to be innovative, but I guess now, fingers crossed, as we get out of the pandemic, there is an opportunity to be innovative again and extend the learning curve. One of the examples that we have seen is that there are solutions which are available, for example, which are called meeting hexagons. What they do is that they actually enable a very, very strong collaboration with the use of 360-degree cameras. They're interactive whiteboards which are essentially integrated into the solution, and the lighting cues are also enabled, so that the person on the screen is not waiting for her or his chance to speak. There is an equitable kind of an experience that is coming across. Now, this kind of a solution obviously is not something which today exists in many places, and not just learning institutions, but also not in many organizations. This is something which has to be focused effort in thinking through how an infra is built which can be utilized over a period of time to make it happen. One of the advantages that we don't talk about often is that how the reach of learning can definitely be extended through this model. Today, a lot of focus has to be all the people coming inside a classroom, learning from the professors, the teachers, as well as from each other. If we make it asynchronous, if we make it distributed, the possibilities are much, much higher than they were earlier. We spoke about a very unique problem, which a lot of organizations don't face, but a lot of learning institutions face, is that the importance of lab ecosystem. I think this is something from secondary school onwards to the time of it gets more important higher education, is that how do we actually gather the learning of being a laboratory, doing the experimentation, failing fast and learning from the failures? How do we emulate that? This is something which actually took some time to perfect. I will not say that it is fully solved, while there are some solutions, innovative solutions we have seen in the industry, but this is something where a lot of research and investment still needs to go. What we have seen is, and this is an example of a player which focuses on a lot of power hardware. I mean, these are like very, very high voltage equipment, protected, which have to be handled a particular way. And we were speaking that how do you ensure that the experimentation continues? What we learned was very interesting, that on a world scale, the organization actually built emulators. And this was a net new innovation that was done over a very, very short period of time. They were able to actually use softwares like LabVIEW, MATLAB, Simulink, and establish a human-machine interface. What that meant is that the time required to be in the laboratory was minimal. There was another advantage that came with this. The advantage is that the usability of the lab equipment actually went up. So by a factor of couple of X, the utility, the way the equipment could be utilized by more number of students or learners in the period of time actually went up. So that to me is like an innovation. We need to think through how that can be replicated, a different kind of laboratory ecosystem that exists and are necessary for any kind of learning. Talk about the aspect of experience of the learners, and we spoke about technology solution that enables it. But there is a human and soft side to this as well. Now, this is a side where I will say that the people who are leading the sessions need to be very, very careful around. And I say that there can be an apprehension of disparity as well. While remote participants believe that, okay, are they being heard enough? How are they being perceived if they're not coming to a particular place physically? The second key element is that the productivity and performance that is being assessed. That do I believe that somebody who comes to a particular place physically more often, are they perceived to be more dedicated or less dedicated? And how does that translate into the assessment of performance? It could be grades, it could be something else as well. And last is that, what is the role of leaders in interaction? I mean, is the interaction equally spread across the different learning participants, or is it focused on a particular set of people? What we say is that there are about 7 dimensions where the focus has to be there. Now, this is something where a lot of organizations are actually focused on a rule book or playbook approach, because much of this was not a challenge about 24 months ago. Today, it's a challenge because it's a new kind of a problem we have solved for. And I'll just call out 2 or 3 which are important. One of the key elements is what I call it affiliation, where how different people feel connected to the community. How does a leader actually enable that? Technology plays a big role in that, but it has to be a focused effort from the leader to make it happen. Best done through a playbook, so that it becomes a muscle memory over a period of couple of quarters. And then, of course, leader bring in their specific style, which obviously learners love and they are attracted to. The second key element that we speak about is the focus of predictability and sustainability. What that means is that as a learner, am I able to keep a tab on how my learning journey would be, right? How am I interacting very carefully with checks and balances so that I don't have to work additional hours just because I am remote or I am operating in a remote and a physical setting. Those were some of the learnings. Still something which is being developed over different industry bodies, different educational institute, but definitely a very, very exciting space to be. Very learned people are focused on this. What we're definitely hopeful is that as we go about, a lot of innovation will continue to come out of what lies ahead. I won't speak a lot about IT security. That is a well-established, focused area. But as we think about, what I will definitely urge is that do share your thoughts. Do share what you have experimented with, what has worked and what has not worked, because that is where, as we are a learning ecosystem today, we go back better than what we came into this session. So that's what we had in terms of some of my thoughts. We'll be very eager to hear if you had any suggestions, questions, and my colleague Arpit, if you want, I can answer some of that. Annie, over to you. We look forward to the discussions. Okay, I don't see any inputs coming through, but please do let me know. I am definitely here, and we'll be very happy to and eager to answer and discuss any questions that the panel as well as the participants have.
Welcome back, everyone. With the COVID-19 pandemic and the sudden shift to virtual learning, this situation has opened up the entire education ecosystem with an abundance of opportunities to innovate and learn from it. In the next panel discussion, we'll hear some great discussions on modern immersive classroom. I would like to invite our moderator, Arpit Gupta, Assistant Editor, ET Government. It's my pleasure to invite the co-panelist, Professor K. Umameshwar Rao, Director, NIT, Surathkal, Dr. Revathi Venkataraman, Chairperson, School of Computing, SRM, Institute of Science and Technology, Amit Pawar, Director, Education Science, Education Asia, Microsoft. Please take the discussion ahead, Arpit.
Thank you, Annie. Hello, and a very warm welcome to the panel discussion, Modern Immersive Classroom, a part of Reimagine Next, the Future of Learning Conference. On behalf of ET Government, I, Arpit Gupta, welcome you all. To lead the panel, I am joined by eminent panelists today. Thank you, Professor Rao. Thank you, Dr. Revathi and Mr. Amit for joining this panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, let's begin the conversation. My first question to Professor Rao. Sir, what has been the experience of NIT Surathkal in transformation of education, and what according to you does the future hold for education sector?
Yeah, I will just break the question into two parts, and then first let me try to answer the first part first. That is our experience in trying to transform from the online classes to the offline classes to the online. And if I recollect, it was in 2009 that MHRD, I have come from IIT Kharagpur on deputation here as a director. When I was in IIT Kharagpur in 2009, there was one proposal from the Ministry of Education, right? This is about developing suitable pedagogical methods for various classes in e-learning. It was in the year 2009. So now it only indicates that it has been there, right, in the minds of everyone to introduce e-learning, but it hasn't happened. But the only change now, which is that the COVID-19 pandemic has really forced the entire humanity of the world to look at e-learning as a savior of education, right? And now everybody has accepted without any debate. Otherwise, we would have really had many debates of whether it is viable, whether it is really effective and all that one. It hasn't happened. So now what exactly we have done at NITK Surathkal is that immediately when the institutions were asked to close down, lockdown, right, we have immediately shifted our gaze to e-learning, right, mainly to save the academic calendar, because our final year students, most of them were by then placed in the industry, and so we didn't really want to shift the final examination, and so that we immediately, within a week's time, we had an emergency senate and then took the decision to shift over to the e-learning with all the the arguments that it is not accessible, it is not affordable, it is not flexible, learning pedagogy is not really effective, and then somebody even questioned that how can engineering be online, right? All these arguments were there thrown at us, but then we sustained the pressure, and then it was decided to go for e-learning, and we have gone for e-learning. In the first few days of this and starting the e-learning, we, like many institutions in the country or across, we did face many problems, particularly with the shift from the traditional mode to the online mode, and then the transforming the entire semester into online the resources overnight. Right? We had the problem of teachers. It's like asking the teachers, right? We are now accustomed to eating with fingers, and suddenly you're asked to use the chopsticks. And so there was some reluctance for the traditional, the teachers who are following the traditional methods of classroom teaching to adapt to online. They had some issues with learning management systems. The thing which we did not foresee is about the students who are spread across the country, and then from various locations, like in cities and then very remote areas. And then we have students from various time zones, and international students. We had this difficulty which we did not foresee. And then we had some problems about the students using the smartphones for logging on, and then the bandwidth problem was there, and then downloading errors were there, issues with the installation was there, and then login problems were there, problems associated with audio, video, hordes of problems were there. And then students initially had lots of problems. Just when we are dealing with the Generation Z or the millennial generation, we have got to be having all the patience to really take the questions from them. And once the system was on the online, we tried to check the effectiveness of that one, taking the feedback from the students. And the feedback really gave us certain things, like it's an eye-opener for us. Like some classes were boring and then unengaging, particularly they missed the personal contact, and sometimes they felt that a lot of theory was dumped on them, and then the students really failed to make a connect with the reality. And then some students even deplored that plenty of assignments were dumped on them, and then there is no time available for them. Right. And then personally, I realized that online classes had the flexibility of time, flexibility of the place. And so I realized that students were taking it little relaxed way. And then I mean that the relaxed attitude prevailed across the students. And then I had a fear that we may lose the students, because when they are not taking the academics serious, there is every chance of losing the students. And then there were even between the lines to say that there were some uninspiring course material was also really communicated to them. These were a few difficulties which we had. So we immediately, within 3-4 weeks time, we try to modify the whole thing, and then put the e-learning on the flipped classroom mode. And where then we had the in-house developed integrated resource information sharing system, that is IRIS, which is really clubbed with Moodle as well as Big Blue Button. So through this one, we try to have the recorded video lectures for the course material, and student had the flexibility of referring to that one as and when it is possible. And then, but we made it mandatory that students have to come for live interaction with the fellow classmates as well as with the teacher. And then when they are logging in through their roll numbers, right, it is automatically recording as they're attending the session. So no attendance that way, right, it was being taken, right. And then secondly, for any educational institution, placement is another important thing. So this time we really try to take care of the placement by trying to reach out to every single company. Rather, I take the pride in really acknowledging the support given by my students as well as the teachers, that during the pandemic time, we got more than the regular times, like 290 companies had come online for the online recruitment. So we could maintain 92% employment of NITK students. So convocations were online. Most of the administrative works were online. And then things really appeared online, smooth. And then we have now, over the period of time, in fact, taken all the rough edges smoothened. And I think we have taken care of the students' requirements and then reaching out to the students' expectations. And our assessment is also been very effective. But everything said and done, maybe 5-10% there are some issues with the students who are not able to access because of internet issues, which is beyond the institution. This has been our first experience. Now, coming to the second part of the question, that is, what according to you does the future hold for education sector? This is what exactly is it has been your second question. So straight away, I'll just try to wrap up both the questions. The traditional approach of engineering subjects is done through the lectures and then seminar halls, wherein the teacher in the classroom or auditorium is verbally trying to communicate and then to the students. And then at best, in an ideal condition, a teacher is maybe using the laptops or computers and trying to upload the PowerPoints, or even trying to use the digital projectors. Right here, in all that one, by and large, the active member in the class in that traditional procedure is that the teacher is active, student is inactive. Right, he is only a passive listener, is in a passive mode, and whereas the teacher is in the active mode. So now here, we can argue that virtual reality as an education tool used alongside with the e-learning, which I mean the blended learning approach, I think that it will actively engage the students and have the positive cognitive and pedagogical benefits. Right. So now this is as far as my view about the first question is concerned.
Thank you, Professor Rao. You actually highlighted the real ground challenges that educational institutions are facing, and the challenges for other educational institutions are more or less the same.
Yeah.
Let us go to the another panelist, Dr. Revati. Having listened to NIT, I would like to understand your experience at SRM in the transformation from offline to online mode of education, and what, according to you, does the future hold for the education sector? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, and hello to everyone. Yeah, as far as our journey is concerned, I would like to break this journey of education into 3 phases, at least in our period. So the first would be the conventional classroom lectures, which was happening sometime in early 2000, which is mostly, as mentioned by Professor Rao, it was a teacher-centered learning session where the students are inactive, they listen to the lecture sessions, and that was going on. And phase 2, I would say, where there was the start of the digital course content, mainly with the availability of internet to everyone, and there were digital materials in the form of lecture notes, predominantly written materials, PPTs, and might be some few lectures. So some of the faculties who are passionate, they actually posted some of their short video lectures in some of the core courses in YouTube. And faculty had started experimenting with the MOOCs because they themselves have enrolled in some of the MOOC courses. This was sometime around 2000, somewhere I would say around 2010, 15, 16, and so on. And the phase 3 is definitely the COVID lockdowns, and when it just hit us on our head, everybody was, in fact, we had the technology, we had the internet, and we started with the remote teaching platforms using Google Meet, Zoom, and so many other platforms that are available. And so I wouldn't say it is an online, we just completely transformed to online, but it was a remote teaching to start with initially. And then a few of the recorded sessions were also floated among the students. And so this actually, pushed us to establish a studio within the institute and have necessary equipments and softwares for developing the course content and so on. And one way it positively impact all of us from a teacher-centric delivery to a learner-centric approach, where there is an inclusive learning, and the teacher may post 1 or 2 questions in the chat box. They may invite the student for discussions, because we need to know when the student is actually online, because in a physical classroom, we always know just to touch base with the students, we ask 1 or 2 questions. And if we get some 1 or 2 responses, we know that I mean, the students are following us, and the lectures are as per whatever way. I mean, it is it's taken in the right sense. But in a virtual mode, you need to just frequently touch base with the students just by asking questions or posting some small queries, quizzes. And so this way we actually converted, slowly we transformed ourselves into a learner-centric approach. And one few challenges that we faced were some of the faculties who are taking the non-IT disciplines, they had a bit of difficulty in getting proficiency in this learning management tools. So we need to conduct faculty training workshops for engaging with digital classrooms for these faculties, and then the e-lab, which is as far as the School of Computing is concerned, we had earlier, even before COVID, we had these e-lab sessions where the students get to practice the programming skills and improve their skills 24/7 through these e-lab sessions. And we also started exploring with virtual labs where the student get to do the simulation of certain experiments, programs, and other things to get a better understanding of the concepts, core engineering concepts. And we also had facilitated digital board-enabled classrooms for mathematical subjects. And after some time, we found that as the faculties started engaging with the students, they themselves started developing some innovative ways to catch the students, retain the students' attention. And they had developed their own small video clips, gaming, learning through gaming. Those sort of concepts were introduced by the faculties. And I could see a lot of innovation that is happening around. So that's the way we had, and we still have a lot more to explore in this space. And I would say the AR and VR part, it has to have that. As of now, we have the smart classrooms, right? So we do have the basic required to engage in a digital classroom. But we need to explore more on the feasibility of providing all the classrooms as virtual classrooms. How do we engage in a very immersive session? Because the students, if you look at the engineering or even in a school environment, the students learn more from their peers than from the lecture or from the teachers. So the peer learning should also happen, and they should have the sense of getting connected to that real world. So things are on the go, and I would say a lot of experimentation. We have transformed a lot. The way we were 18 months back, that's what I would say, but still we have a long way to go for an immersive classroom. Yeah.
And I think COVID has accelerated the pace of digital transformation across sectors, and education is no more exception. Technology has a big role to play here. So let me go to Mr. Amit Pawar. Mr. Pawar, as the global technology leader, can you share your thoughts with us? How does the industry look at the transformation of education sector? And using Microsoft tools, how can faculty and student engagement be enhanced in the hybrid sessions? Your comments.
Yeah, thank you, Arpit. And really a pleasure to be here today to kind of share our thoughts on how Microsoft's been helping education industry transform. And I loved all the insights that we've had from our esteemed panelists today. I concur with them in terms of the forced transformation or the accelerated transformation that happened because of the pandemic. Has really kind of changed everything from the modality of engagement, the type of the experiences that we are able to have, and also the speed at which this change is happening is quite dramatic. So the approach we are taking is from fundamentals. So we've actually looked at it in terms of how do we help education institutions transform holistically. And what that actually looks at is all of the sides of all the aspects of transformation, from student success to teaching and learning to academic research to actually secure connected campuses. All of these areas need to come together to enable these experiences. And there are multiple facets behind each of these pillars. And what we did was we actually put all of this together in what we are calling the Microsoft Education Transformation Framework. What we are doing there is sharing the learnings from the past 40 years of digital transformation. As I think Professor Rao said earlier, transformation from a digital perspective is nothing new. It is something that has been accelerated by COVID. Yes. And fortunately, we've been in this situation where we've been engaging education institutions for the last 40 plus years as a technology provider to higher education, K-12, to ministries, to even vocational schools and others. And we've learned what it means to do the digital transformation. What does it mean to actually enable student retention? What does it mean for student recruitment, alumni engagement, learning management, collaborative learning space itself? All of these things are now something that everybody is talking about, but it needs to be thought about holistically. So my number one call out will be that think holistically, think about the transformation as a framework and as a journey. And what we did see, Arpit, is that as the pandemic took hold, we saw adoption of tools which were either familiar or something that was, emulated by looking at what other institutions were doing, which meant a lot of institutions have created data silos by introducing multiple applications to enable this hybrid teaching and learning. So one of our key learning is to have a unified, extensible platform for teaching and learning and work is critical. That platform needs to empower all different modalities, and also inclusion and accessibility should be at the heart of it. Because as we have found out, there are students who have their own disabilities and learning requirements that need to be catered for, whether it's hearing disability, visual, cognitive, and other physical disabilities. That means that their ability to be included in this digital world differs and needs to be accommodated for. So that's something that we've been very focused on at Microsoft, to make sure that accessibility and inclusion is fundamental and foremost from design rather than an add-on. In the past, we've actually had to add on, capabilities from a software, hardware perspective. That's no longer the case. The other thing is learning spaces. How do we make sure that we have innovative devices that modernize the learning space? Right from having the right device at the end of a connection, which empowers you with the right, experience, be it a webcam, be it a microphone, be it a touch and pen enabled device that enables you to teach various subjects that need a ink enabled learning experience like maths, arts, music, and others. Accommodating the learning requirements for different subjects and faculties that are within a higher education institution is paramount. So having the right device and the right learning space is another part of it. We are now seeing post kind of this flip-flop between offline, online. We are also seeing the advent of more lecture recordings. And I noticed that our panelists also shared that. And creating a high-quality recording experience, sharing experience has become paramount. The last one, which I'll focus on, is data-driven conversation. Because now that we're introducing these digital experiences, we have the opportunity to learn by looking at the interaction and the data that it's generating. I kind of compare it to having a fitness tracker. I wear a fitness tracker for measuring different aspects of my personal health, be it heartbeat or whatever else, right? In a similar way, now that we are interacting with a digital environment through solutions like Microsoft Teams or through Microsoft 365, we have different data points that have been actually collected in the background. Who is using which document? How often are they online? Are they engaging in the conversation in chat? Because now chat has created an opportunity for inclusion for those who are perhaps shy in physical classes. They are now, much more inclined to sharing with each other. So we are now able to look at who's interacting with who, how are the communities forming organically or organized by the institution. So there is now a lot more data, and AI can be applied to it to see those patterns and then take remedial actions or interventions to make sure that that experience is a lot more organized and a lot better. As I'm hearing from the panelists earlier, we want to enable a better teaching learning outcome for all our students. And the last thing is, now that we are talking about technology, it is upon vendors like us who are platform providers to make this as simple, secure, accessible, and inclusive as possible. So we heard about, internet being a challenge, the right device being a challenge. And it is the industry's opportunity to also think about fundamentally rethinking ways of interactions, ways of making sure that it is secure and private and compliant. Because other things we saw during the early days of the pandemic was there was digital mischief, if you like, occurring with people taking advantage of poor security. And security is a key metric that we measure. And unfortunately, education is the #1 attacked industry on the planet for malware, for ransomware and others, because the industry hasn't had the opportunity to adapt and actually increase their maturity of the digital technology deployment, which means there is a soft underbelly that malicious actors can take advantage of. And there is a lot of data for students and for financial information that can be harvested by targeting education institutions. So I also want to, encourage everyone who's listening to us today to also think about holistically the security of your IT infrastructure and how that is going to enable a safe, secure way of not just digital learning, but also in future hybrid learning in person or online. I hope that gives you a bit of insight into how we're thinking about this.
Very well described, Mr. Amit Pawar. While our learning platforms should be simple and inclusive, it has to be in a secured environment as well, because data transfer between the educational institutions among the teachers and students is very huge and very important, very critical. Professor Rao, how can technology be leveraged to create powerful and immersive learning experiences that would not be possible in a traditional in-person classroom?
Yeah, at the outset, let me just try to remind all those who are listening that we are in the digital era. And there is a real serious need to improve our 21st century skills of the students and make them digital literates. And let us all once again recall the mission of National Education Policy 2020 for India to emerge as a knowledge superpower, and then in the shortest possible time. It is absolutely imperative to convert our demographic advantage into a knowledge powerhouse, okay, by nurturing and honing our the population or the demography into a knowledge or knowledge enabled population. This is the basic mission of our National Education Policy 2020. And there is no second thought about trying to apply the available digital technologies to evolve our existing traditional methods of teaching, learning, and assessment. There is no second opinion. It has to be done because it's the time. Otherwise, we'll be left behind. All right. So now we are in a global world, and so it is paramount important that the digital learning should be introduced into our system. And where here at NITK, we have already created, it's again a long drawn thing. It's an old one, 2009. NITK has created a virtual lab. And this is also a funded project of the National Mission on the Education through ICT. Right here, the students have been using this virtual laboratory. They are logging in during the lockdown period also to do their lab classes, right? And then virtual lab, these laboratories, they are classified into all the areas of engineering as well as the sciences. Right, they can really go through the institute website and then go to the different particular department, and then in that department one subject, and then what are all the labs that are there, and then they go to a specific lab, right? And then with respect to a specific particular experiment also. Okay, every experiment has an introduction, the procedure, self-evaluation, and there is a simulation also. And as far as the assessment is concerned, there are quizzes available, right? Pre and then post after the experiment is done, and then you are going to have even the references. At the end, even we have even uploaded this in a video lectures so that they can even go through that one. So now in a virtual laboratory system, a student has the flexibility to conduct the experiments. Say, for example, to find out the punch shear strength of any sample, right? He can really go on to the particular experiment in the civil department and then go to the strength of materials and go to that particular experiment and then log on to that one and then conduct the experiment. And then his values are really described and then he'll get to know that one. So he'll clearly understand that one. The second aspect which you have been really stating within your question is that a scope for immersive learning experience, right? And in fact, it puts the learner into an environment that simulates the real world by incorporating all the four modes of the learning. That is visual learning, the auditory learning, written learning, and kinesthetic learning. Okay. So now here, virtual reality can be used to help the student to thoroughly immerse themselves in the subject with the help of visual tours. Right? It is like making them responsible and making them involved in the learning process. It can even be more efficient and more effective also. Right? So let me just take an example. For instance, for the skills that have a kinesthetic component, such as machine assembly, or the subjects like fluid mechanics, or the face-to-face workshop interactions, right? So now augmented reality or virtual reality tools can be of a great help for the student to really understand the very concepts of that one. And then the simulations, and where it is not kinesthetic one, right? So now the computer simulations environment can really be of greatest help for the student to understand the subject very effectively and then in a more engaging way. And then let me just tell you, taking a small example here, right? There are some courses in engineering, particularly if I take the example of civil engineering, fluid mechanics or thermodynamics, which are really defined as some of the very tough subjects. Tough because the theories or the concepts are not clearly understood by the students, right? When they don't understand, they don't accept. When they don't accept, they don't like. When they don't like, they don't really enjoy the subject, and then they develop a sort of aversion to that particular subject. The reason is that when they did not understand, they struggle to apply the essence or the meaning of that one in real-time problems. So that is how they are missing in the process of getting educated. So now here, let us assume that one. If the same subject is being really, again, right, along with the theory which is there, right, if VR application is there, virtual reality application is there, for example, right, let me again take the example of fluid mechanics, right? So now, what if the changing the parameters, what is the effect of changing the parameters on the end result? So to be very specific, change the length of the pipeline in a model, keeping the other parameters constant, like the fluid or fluid properties or the size of the pipe and various other parameters keeping constant, just to change the pipeline and then see the changes in a virtual mode, right? In an augmented reality, in a virtual mode, you can just conduct the experiment, which is not really expensive, right? You can just have as many parameters changed as possible, and then the student gets an opportunity to relate that particular thing which he has seen to the theory which has been explained to him in the class. So now there, the subject which otherwise is not possible to be taught, to make every student, right, to take the students with the teacher, is possible in this particular the mode of this immersive classrooms, and then that is application of augmented reality or even the virtual reality, and then the artificial intelligence. So let me again give you another example of this open heart surgeries, right? I think in West, and there are so many virtual reality heart surgery simulators, right? The group of doctors, they have the opportunity to experiment on that one as many number of times as possible until they get the real effect of the confidence before they walk into the theater and then really they operate upon the subject or even the patient. So now here in this process, the life of the patient is taken care. They are not experimenting on the patient himself, right? They are experimenting on the virtual models. Just imagine that the same opportunities are now provided, right? Not augmented with the traditional ones, right? A student will really have an environment where he's able to enjoy enjoy the subjects which otherwise is really categorizing them as these tough subjects, right? So now, therefore, if all these engineers and these doctors, right, with their confidence levels, if they walk into the real life from the virtual life, they walk into the real life, don't you realize that the life around them and the life around us is going to be very well taken care? And therefore, in my opinion, right, the application of virtual reality in all forms, or the digital technology in all forms, it has to go hand in glove with the traditional one. So the theories are not just the theories. They are not just dumped on the students. The theories have a relevance in solving the real-time problems. Only thing is that a student should be given an opportunity of inclusive learning. Right? It's like we used to have 5 years engineering degree where we used to have the opportunity to go into the industry. Now it has been reduced to 4 years, right? They're going into the industry, and once again it is coming back as an internship. Right? Internship, when the subject is already learned, has a lesser consequence than when the subject is being taught, and then the student has the opportunity of really learning them while he is being taught through the virtual reality, the simulators. I think this is nothing like it. And then we'll have every single 90% of the students will be skilled. 90% of the students will have the opportunity to be employed. You will never ever be suffering from Indian engineers are not employable. That doesn't really exist. It is my opinion.
Right. Let me take this to Dr. Revati as well. Dr. Revati, time is a constant. I'll request you to please keep your answer as short as possible. Please share your thoughts. How can technology be leveraged to create powerful and immersive learning experiences that would not be possible in a traditional in-person classroom?
Yeah. With the national education policy, which has been rolled out and stressing on the integration of technology across the classrooms. So the educational institutions have already started investing on these modern smart classrooms. So these learning spaces, basically, they will have a multi-sensory environments into these modern classrooms, giving the students a very engaging and an inclusive learning experience for the students. And it is also highly customizable. So as mentioned by the Professor Rao, the student can repeatedly look at the videos or to understand the concepts better, change the parameters and see what is the effect of a particular experiment, and then do it repeatedly until he is convinced or completely understands the concept. So unlike in a classroom teaching where you sit within 4 walls and you in a virtual classroom, it's going to give you a very immersive experience where you have a different situations which are actually in your hands. You can change the situation at your will and wish, and even the environment and the settings, and see what is the outcome and effect of all those things. So that's the thing the immersive, the technology brings to the learner as a whole. And but let me just give you another insight of, how do we implement these things, considering the institutions that we have in the considering Indian educational institutions. So creating such facilities, it requires a lot of planning, effort, maybe imagination, cost, and so on. So it might not be inclusive to all the things, because we have to look at the institutions across the tiers and across the cities, and whether we have all these things are dependent on the connectivity, whether we have the last mile connectivity to all the students. And then it has its own challenges, like the hardware could also be very expensive, and we need to have the content which is properly curated. And of course, people have started developing these contents and with different platforms. There are plenty of platforms that are available, but a lot has to be educated in this front on the content developers as well. And I mean, the adoption of technology is a very big thing that needs to be considered, and appropriate budgeting should also be done within the which considering the lifespan of that particular technology. And with modern smartphones and in fact the lidar and other things, we have the AR in the palm of our hand. And the thing is, the challenge here lies with the facilitators who are staying. We have to stay ahead of the curve, and you have to understand the trends on how to maximize the effectiveness of this particular technology in the educational sector. So that is one of the very significant challenge that lies in front of us. And definitely, as Professor Rao mentioned, we have got lots and lots of applications for AR, VR, and many of the products are also maturing in the market in different sectors. Healthcare, as I was mentioning about the surgeries, robotic surgeries, and then also in the educational sectors, in the immersive classroom, a lot of startups are also coming up in this particular space. And so definitely this technology can bring in a lot of change towards this learner-centric approach, and also towards personalized learning. So that's my take on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Revati. You rightly pointed out one very important thing here, that content curation is a very, very important aspect of digital education, because a lot of content is available on internet, YouTube, and the digital platforms. But what should be adopted and studied has to be curated by the experts and the education leaders. Mr. Amit Pawar, let me understand your point of view. As we all know that artificial intelligence, machine learning has begun making its place in the academic sphere, making it more accessible. Yes. Is there an innovative one-stop shop kind of a technology platform of Microsoft that can be used to help connect academic institutions and deliver a new level of engaging, interactive, and inclusive teaching and learning and more?
Yeah, that's a great question, Arpit. And in context of everything that's been said, I mean, we've talked a little bit about, mixed reality, which can be, broken up into augmented and virtual reality. There are many other aspects of this conversation, right? So how do we actually create a unified platform to bring all of these people together and to enable that teaching and learning? How do we enable faculty and staff coordination and communities within the faculty and staff to enable exactly what you just said? How do we get them to think through about the content, the lesson planning, the engagement plans, how do we bring in external parties and external content into it, whether it's already in your systems or you're going to, take content from elsewhere. How do we enable project-based learning? Because the other aspect of this is what digital technologies enable is this rapid, forming of teams, virtual teams, that go and solve a problem, come back, report on it, and then you've got this ability to then report back on these things. Other aspects are professional development of our educators. I think that was called out by Professor Rao. At the beginning of the pandemic, we also had to make sure that professional development happens on an ongoing basis to make sure that our educators are abreast of all of the changes that are happening in this environment or this ecosystem of technology. So that's how we've been focused on creating that unified platform. And for that, we are enabling that through our Microsoft 365 platform, and it's been adopted by over 150 million users across the world. We are even seeing innovative use of technologies like Minecraft for Education, which is a 3D, block-based game. But we've actually even been surprised that higher education institutions have used it to teach abstract concepts in engineering, in science, in chemistry, physics, and other subjects related to STEM. So it's been quite a learning experience for me in the last 18 months plus to also understand how our education institutions have been innovative in the use of our platform. The other area I will highlight is the use of AI in actually encouraging more of a conversation between people and using AI to build a knowledge base of all of that conversation that's happening. So we are able to capture questions from various people and the AI can then go out to a bank, a data bank, or a answer bank, and be able to answer the most frequently asked questions, which frees up our teachers, our lecturers, and lab assistants and others who are involved in teaching and learning to answer more of the higher level questions that don't require a mundane just look up a fact and provide an answer back. So AI can take care of some of that mundane kind of tasks and free up our teachers to take advantage of their time to provide more higher level cognitive opportunities for our students to engage with them. So there is a continuum, if you like, from simple teaching and learning experiences like a video conference through to augmented reality, through mixed reality, and then now leveraging AI to also come in there to start helping us with things like a speech to text, being able to transcribe what's happening in a video so that it can be translated into multiple languages. I heard Professor Rao say that he has students from overseas, and that can help from an inclusion perspective. Using AI to also practice delivery of content. So Presenter Coach is a capability in PowerPoint now that actually has an AI backend that sees how well you're presenting, whether you're speaking fast, whether you're using repetitive words like and ahs, and also helping you not read the slide, because the intention is never to read the slide. The intention is to absorb what's on the slide and then interpret and provide you an analysis on it. So those are the forms in which AI really is changing the game in how we can start leveraging it in a day-to-day basis, but also use, like I said before, also use AI and ML to understand trends within this interaction, trends within the adoption of technology, trends within the interaction with the technology. So there are multiple aspects that we can use AI, and it's out of the box, by the way. This is not something you have to add on. It's something that is now infused into the platform and not something that you need to think about additionally anymore. So that's been a fundamental shift in how a lot of our customers are thinking about it. I'll end with one last example. We are now working with some of the more early adopters of technology to move towards this recommendation-based work. So everyone is familiar with what happens when you go to a commerce site. When you buy one thing, it recommends something else. When you watch something on a OTT platform, it recommends something else, which is similar. So we are using recommendation engines using AI and ML to actually even accelerate the learning for students. So if you have got through, the first module, maybe you want to get to module B, module C, or whatever it is. That will help you accelerate. Or if you're not able to get through module A, maybe you need remediation help to go back and get your fundamentals right. So this recommendation engine will understand your level of proficiency with a particular subject and recommend how things can work and guide you through this learning journey, which can be then augmented with a real educator to help you, further guide you through that actual journey. So there are some really cutting edge work that is happening right now across Asia Pacific that I am very encouraged by. That I see the future is now being data driven, being a lot more AI and ML driven in that concept as well. So yeah, that's a little bit of a view from how we are seeing it, and would love the opportunity to engage with our attendees and their education institutions to see how Microsoft can engage with you and help you.
Thank you, Amit, for sharing these insights. We are just heading towards the end of the conversation, but before that, quickly, I would like to know from Professor Rao and Dr. Revati. Actually, there is a question from the audience. Were you using any LMS? And if yes, which LMS was that?
NITK, we are just using it's our in-house. As I said, that IRIS is what we have. Our own students have really developed that one. It is that we are just using here. So this is really tied up with Microsoft as well as the Big Blue Button. So this is what we are using here at Surat.
So in SRM also we are using our own developed in-house developed LMS for our teaching and evaluation purpose. But still it is under development, and but it has gone live. But we are just adding more and more features as we bring.
Professor Rao, what do you think should be the future of education, and what should be the way forward in 1 or 2 lines, please?
Now, way forward is, I think at the end of this particular the panel discussion, it's all very clear. We are all converging to the point that it has to be a flipped both. That's a blended mode. That we just cannot really go on with the traditional one. It has to be with the as well as an AR, AI, VI, and all these things apply to that one. Only thing is that, as what Professor Revati Madam has stated, that so one has to really go into formulating the curriculum and into that one, and just the what exactly is the learning objective, what are the learning objectives, and then the outcomes are there. These have to be really assessed. Let me just, in one sentence, I'll just tell you that our engineering education has been that theory is supported by the laboratory. The courses used to be there in the traditional itself. Now, of late, what has happened is that some of the laboratory courses have become very, very expensive for the repetitive things. Like if you want to find out the strength of any sample or cement cube, right, 100 samples, right, it is not really possible to really, what is that called in terms of money, it's not possible really. So now, if those things are really taken care in the initial phase, right, in the virtual reality mode, and then if you have the simulators, and then you can just have hordes of variation, and then student is able to really have a large data really created, and then that helps him to come out with the assimilate the theory behind that one, and that's how it has to be done. Only thing is that curriculum has to be very well designed, right? Curating that one, as what Professor Revati Madam has stated that one, and then learning outcomes have to be very well clearly defined and then applied in steps. Everything doesn't happen all in a sudden, like the bolt from the blue, right? We have got to learn as we are really moving forward. The way we are learning the COVID-1, Alpha, Beta, Delta, and then now Omicron, we are really learning how to really conduct ourselves to really face that one. Again, we are all open for that one. I think this is how the education in India, it has to be absolutely be increasing the skill of our students. It's my wish. And then our engineering students have to be employed 100%. Not that the statement saying that only 7% are employable, that really hurts the teachers as well at the end of the day.
Thank you. Let me quickly ask Dr. Revati in 1 or 2 lines, since we are running short of time. What do you think should be the future of education, and what should be the way forward?
Definitely, the blended mode will continue, and as the trend goes, the online learning has got a lot of because got a lot of traction these days, because we could see a lot of people on getting enrolled for online mode of education also. So definitely it is there, and as suggested by Professor Rao, we have transformed ourselves in a big way in the past 1.5 years, and we still have to go forward and speculating all these things, and definitely the technology has to be adopted in some way or other, but as there are certain challenges which we have to iron out, and before we take it forward. So that would be my question.
Thank you, Dr. Revati. Amit, before I wrap up the discussion, same question to you. What do you think should be the way forward?
Yeah, so I think first of all, as I said in my opening remarks, we want to be helping from a holistic transformation, not just for technology's sake. So think through the whole education transformation framework. Do a search on the internet and you'll find the Microsoft Education Transformation Framework as a guide. Second is think through a unified platform rather than bringing in siloed solutions, because the power of data is going to be what will differentiate one institution from the other. Because the more insights we have into the use of this digital, the digital-led transformation, the better decisions we'll be able to make on how the interaction should happen. And lastly, make sure that it is, fundamentally set on the right foundation of security and compliance and identities and those sort of technical side of things as well. So the operational side of it is also taken care of to enable this hybrid teaching learning.
Thank you, Amit. And I think all of us would agree that technology is the future, and hybrid or blended mode of education is going to stay for a longer time. So we should adapt to the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, I conclude today's panel discussion. And once again, I thank you all for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you everyone for such an engrossing discussion on modern immersive classrooms. Thank you, Arpit, for bringing out the best from the discussion. Now we have a MTC showcase on a day in a life of a professional from industry. I would like to invite Mr. Shubham Dubey from Microsoft to take over. Over to you, Shubham.
Hey, Annie, thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, and hopefully that's not evening for you. The idea here is, Amit and everyone discussed about the classroom of the future, right? But essentially, whatever capabilities that we have, right? The capabilities that we are looking for a blended hybrid learning experience. The idea here is, okay, what is at the center, right? Whether you talk about leveraging your existing identity and ensuring that the data, now that data could be an institute's data, students' data, professors' data, right? They remain secure right from your silicon, your chip to the cloud, right? Whatever experience that you want to have in terms of digital learning, digital gamification, STEM subjects, so on and so forth. All that you want to leverage, the center stage is your devices, right? Because at the end of the day, what you really have in hand is devices, and the quality and I would say the experience that as a professional, as a student that you would get will highly rely on the quality of devices that you have, or the devices that you're using, right? Now, that's where a device really makes the difference. And if you were to ask me, hey, Shubham, what are the top three, you would say, differentiators that really makes Surface perfect, fit for educations, right? So the first thing that that comes to my mind is the Surface devices that are designed to provide protection right from silicon to cloud, which includes guarding against firmware attacks and data being stolen. Now, imagine there's a lot of IPs, research-based IPs that universities have. So it is really important that the data is end-to-end protected, right? So that's where devices like Surface really makes that difference. Number one. Number two, it adapts to most persona in a typical educational institute. So we have been talking to students who are in, let's say, K-12 grade, high school, universities, postgrads, right? Right from teachers, professors, dean, administrators, librarians, so on and so forth. So all the personas that you probably can think of, Surface devices, we have plethora of devices to support and make their typical day productive. Third, I would say the quality and designed for purpose. Now, from I would say from inside out, material used to build Surface devices are chosen after rigorous testing. Elements that are critical to internal mechanics, like adhesive and circuitry components, are tested as you rigorously, or rather, as you kind of rigorously as those you see and you touch, and screens and paints and fabrics and whatnot. And of course, Microsoft's bold environmental commitments also help define the materials we choose. So, for example, we have been iterating with magnesium alloy for 11 years as we have worked to perfect the metallurgy and manufacturing of the materials. So, for example, the Surface Pro 7's magnesium alloy unibody, it allows it to be lighter and thinner than most of its competitor, even with a built-in kickstand. The Alcantara covered keyboard, for example, is treated with a high performance polyurethane coating to resist spills, right? And also our metallurgists, they use a process called anodization that essentially creates a chemical reaction with the aluminum that allows us to create beautiful color finishes. Now, the next few slides, we will also see what different rigorous testings that we do. Of course, there are many, but few that we're gonna have a look is number one, we have tests designed to evaluate how long screens would last if they are pressed 1,000 times, in the same spot by a finger or a pen while in a kiosk mode, right? Now, with 200-degree temperature and humidity chambers, we can simulate how a hot device will get when you have open dozen of different application that would probably require high CPU usage. So we even have ovens for that matter that are large enough to run these tests for a Surface Hub 2S, which is an 80-inch collaboration device that you will see in a moment. We have keyboard abrasion testings with the finger going up and down and side to side thousands of times to help you understand how long you can use your trackpad before the material starts peeling. Now this helps us. This kind of help us as we design our products to keep them up and ensure that the quality is there and how you use them throughout its typical life cycle. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the plethora of devices that we have, it covers all the different personas. So today we will just see how it is helping, let's say, somebody who's a student and somebody who's a professor and someone who is a dean or a principal and helping some of the key scenarios that is helping throughout their typical day. Now, as a student, of course, since we are now working in hybrid blended world, there are different set of challenges, right? You want to ideate with natural expression. You want to feel included, and since you can now learn from anywhere, you need the end-to-end chip-to-cloud security, right? So the first experience that you would see is from our Surface Go, which can be a very good fit for students. It's a 2-in-1, really sleek, form factor, and it's lightweight, easy to carry. So let's see how some of these experiences would look like, right? So the first, thing is, just don't rely on passwords. You can enable two-factor authentication. As some of the research says that it can alone stop almost 99% of the attack with Windows Hello. So what you just saw was a facial expression. So if I to just play the video once again, it kind of gets start recognizing your face. We also have form factors with fingerprint sign-ins as well. The second experience that we will now hear is, you think with ink. Now you can write and draw naturally, a comfortable size and just a perfect fit for students at just about 145 mm. Microsoft Class Pen 2 makes it easy to sketch, color, and take notes in the classroom, at home, use the buttons to select and erase the content. Next experience is you just saw, I would say a whiteboard application. The handwriting just got improved. So that's a perfect manifestation of a balance between hardware and a software, right? You also saw a kickstand, which kind of which transforms your laptop to tablet and vice versa. And for your information, the Core 2 is a 2-in-1 device which supports a separate, I would say, tablet mode, right? So these are some really cool and key experiences that can really accentuate your experience. Now, what you see here is an example of speech to text translation by GoTo, as it is powered by dual far field studio mic that captures nuance and inflection of your voice while ensuring that it minimizes the background, I would say, distractions, right? So these can really help you while you're conducting or attending the lectures online and you're presenting something while sitting in your home or any other place, right? Um, Moving forward to the next experience, you see the keyboard here, right? Now, this keyboard is something which is detachable. And once you detach it, it automatically gets converted into tablet mode, and you also get Surface Connect port as well. Uh, Next, about the gamification. Now, gamification can be of different types depending upon the type of students that we're targeting. But the experience is really amazing because if we talk about Go, it has a pixel sense display. The ratio is for 220 ppi and 3:2 aspect ratio, and it has got 10 different multi-touch points, right? So this can really help to for multi users and collaborations if you're looking for that. Uh, we just saw some of the use cases. There are many, but at the end of the day, GoTo being a sleek two-in-one device that can really help you students, become easy to take and carry it at any place, right? From student to professors. Now, professors, again, the challenges are how do you ensure that you conduct those digital classes and give the immersive experiences across all the students. So that's where Pro 7, one of our form factors, can really come handy. So what I'll do is I'll quickly go ahead and share my complete screen in this case. Just a quick heads up if anybody can give if you're able to see my screen. I'll take it as a yes. So I was talking about Surface Pro 7 Plus as one of the form factors which can really amplify the experience of professors, considering the kind of blended learning experiences that we are in midst of. So the top three features that I would want to talk about is the LTE. Now imagine, as a professor, you are in a bleak internet zone. Probably the Wi-Fi, the internet Wi-Fi connection is a challenge. Now that's where LTE Advanced can really help you with the with you to sort of stay connected with the world. Number two, about the performance. Now, talking about the performance, it has got dual core processors, quad core processors, right from 11th generation i3, i5, and i7. So if you're someone who does a lot of graphics rendering and high compute is your demand, then Pro 7 would be able to cater that as well. Kickstand hinge, I really like this because it gives me that leverage. I can leverage this hinge to sort of make adjustments. Sometimes I use it as a tablet mode. Sometimes if I'm teaching, I'll probably use the kickstand and teach my students, right? The third one that I really liked about this is it has got a removable SSD. So a lot of times you have certain information, you want to pass it on to some of your colleagues who probably is traveling to some other location. You can always ensure that you can remove the SSD for data retention, and this actually meets most of your security requirements and enable devices to be repurposed across various professors and employees. Now, these were some of the use cases for Pro 7 Plus. Now, the next experience that I wanted to talk about is how do you amplify your dean's office, right? Now, that's where our all-in-one collaboration device, Surface Hub 2S, can really help here, because this comes in two different flavors. One is a 50-inch display, another is a 85-inch display. So if you talk about the display that you see, it's a It's a 4K display. Again, very good in terms of design. Very less bezels you will find here, and in terms of other specification, it has got 20 different multi-touch points. So imagine you as a chancellor, your vice chancellor standing in the chancellor's room, and you guys are collaborating, co-authoring with people and professors who are sitting at their home. And since this is a Windows 10 power device, you can have all your documents, your Power BI dashboards, and whatnot, and can really collaborate. And one of the really cool factors about Hub2S here is it has got mobility, although you do not get that out of the box. So what we have done is we have partnered with Steelcase, and one of the use cases that we have is you can take this collaboration device to any of your focus rooms, and that focus room readily converts into state-of-art conferencing experience. Apart from that, you get all your AV system right embedded within the Surface Hub. And of course, if you talk about the battery backup, so we have partnered with Schneider, and you see here the APC UPS. So it gives around 2.5 hours of uninterrupted power supply, so that you can conduct your meetings, taking your Surface Hub along with you. I think these are the core capabilities which really makes this device as one of the go-to option if you're looking for the powerful collaboration device within your dean's office. With this, it's a wrap from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Dubey, for sharing your experiences. With that, we have come to the end of the summit. I would like to invite Mr. T. Radhakrishna, Editor, South ET Government, for the final comments. Over to you.
Keynote speaker, Boston Consulting Group partner, Mr. Amit Kumar, distinguished speakers, delegates from the central government, state governments, and central universities and state universities. On behalf of ET Government, I raise to formally propose a vote of thanks at Microsoft Presents Reimagine Next, the future of learning held today. Our keynote speaker, Mr. Amit, is our overall framework to help drive the discussion and highlight 3 specific areas important for education sector. According to Mr. Amit Kumar, enabling lab ecosystem in hybrid setup. Labs include a lot of hardware, and creating a remote setting can be challenging. How can lab process be reimagined to enable hybrid model? Enabling innovation is another. Innovation is a collaborative process which functions well when participants are co-located. How can we help innovation flywheel to spin the hybrid model? The third, last one, is the equitable experience for all participants. It is imperative to ensure fair and equal treatment to both remote and in-person participants. What are the enablers to ensure equitable experience? Thank you, Mr. Amit Kumar, and your insights. The new education policy will drive India's education system to the newer heights, enabling policy structure in the form of National Education Policy 2020, equality education institutions, societal inclusivity with multiculturalism, and focus on innovation, entrepreneurship, and internationalization will drive India's education system to newer heights. This is what highlighted by the distinguished speakers at the panel discussion. Ultimately, technology will drive the learning and education. So I feel that the post-COVID, with the National Education Policy 2020 in place, we must become a more confident nation. We must do globally relevant and globally competitive education and research. And it is possible that we should be able to scale up our operations and reach a large number of young minds. If we do this well, I think we will be able to handshake the aspirational minds of the country. This opportunity we should never miss. I once again thank our keynote speaker, distinguished panelists, and delegates for making the summit a grand success. Keep watching itgovernment.com for latest updates on e-governance and also education and learning areas. So we shall meet you soon with another exciting opportunity. Thank you very much.